Hello and welcome to MxMLive. We are delighted to have here with us Manisha Kapoor, who is the CEO and Secretary General of the Advertising Standards Council of India, which is ASCI in short. Before we start, hello, Manisha, how are you?
I'm good, Pradyuman. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show, and look forward to some interesting discussions.
Absolutely, even I'm looking forward to it. Before we start, a full disclosure, I have been part of the Advertising Standards Council of India, CCC, which is the Complaints Council, for the last 7 years. But those of you who know me and who know MxMIndia know that that doesn't really matter as far as editorial content is concerned. That's another part of me, and well, that's how it is. So, Manisha, IPL, the Indian Premier League, has just got over, and the entire country, the entire world looks forward to it, all the action. But do you at ASCI look forward to it, given the fact that there is another kind of action that happens?
Yeah, so we've seen this actually, Pradyuman, over the last 3 to 4 years, where a lot of new campaigns are actually launched on the IPL, and there are brands that pretty much spend almost their entire year's budget on IPL, so we see a lot of new campaigns. And in fact, earlier what used to happen was that, the way our television feed operates is that, it comes after a week or 10 days, and then we kind of scan it and, then identify ads that could be violative. And in fact, we did not have till a couple of years back separate monitoring for OTT. But I think just given the number of campaigns that were breaking, on IPL, we in fact got TAM, which is our monitoring partner, to actually do a specific monitoring of the OTT channels for us, to kind of pick out ads. And I feel every year there is almost like a new edition, a certain category kind of just becomes very visible during the IPL. So I think the first year that, I came into ASCI, I remember we just had a lot of ads for alcohol brand extensions, and then it was gaming, and then it is so there's always something interesting. So now we have a system where we actually pretty much get the data with a 2-day lead time, so it's quite fast. And I think our endeavor is that if we are able to identify these violations, particularly in the early part of the IPL, that hopefully by the end of the IPL, which is when viewership also peaks, that, some of these ads could already be corrected. But yeah, it is, it's not an easy thing. And I think particularly now with digital, there are multiple feeds actually. So it's not even a single feed that one has to monitor. There are multiple fields in multiple languages with different ads being served. So yeah, our life keeps getting more and more complex with digital.
So but you continue to look forward to the IPL.
Well, it is, yeah, for us, in a sense, it's what you can call peak season. Yeah, I mean, look forward to it in some way, but yeah, I mean, it is a very, very busy time for us.
But, what you mentioned is where the problem is. For instance, it gets corrected, but the number of inserts that are there of an ad these days, in a particular day, in a particular hour, in a particular over, in many ways, the damage is done, right? With just in just a day, etc. So, do you sometimes feel helpless that you really can't do anything about it?
So I think it's about understanding what ASCII's mandate is. And I think, if you look at any large problems of the world, and perhaps, problematic advertising could be one of them, I don't think that there is any single body or any single person or, any single entity that can completely solve the problem. I think in the overall ecosystem of advertising regulation, we have a certain role to play. I think so long as we play our role well, we are open to, evolving with times. We are, trying to understand, identify what the challenges are, and working to the best of our ability to, protect consumers in this situation. I mean, I would say that, we would be satisfied that, we've done our job. But yes, is it perfect? No. And I think particularly with digital, with very, very high profile campaigns, and also just the short duration of campaigns, I think is what, is one of the big challenges for regulators like us today. But yes, I think it is a challenge, and yeah, I mean, there are times when we feel we could, could we do more? And I think that's always the endeavor, and we'll keep pushing. I mean, we will keep pushing. Yeah, will it ever be perfect? I don't know, but yeah, we will keep improving.
You mentioned just now about the role as a self-regulator, and I think you know being part of the process that works at ASCII, and I've seen it over the years. I'm very certain when I say this that the processes that you follow at ASCII are excellent, and it has leapfrogged considerably over the years, and it's got tighter. But you mentioned about the role that you play. Do you sometimes feel that perhaps others are not playing the role that they should? For instance, all these ads are finally relaying on not the platforms of the advertiser. They are being relayed on platforms of some other channel or platform or internet service. And these are the people who should also be as responsible as anybody else. Do you sometimes feel that?
No, absolutely. I think, the advertising ecosystem, it just is not made of the advertiser, right? There's an agency who would make the ad. There is a broadcaster who would publish the ad. And therefore, collectively, in fact, even ASCII's membership, comprises members of all of these different sectors. I think, again, over a period of time, there have been laws to govern television and to govern press. And those are, in a sense, established laws. And therefore, I would say that, there is a much tighter scrutiny. And when there is a breach, the law is very clear in terms of what the role also of, the media is. But I think on the internet, and particularly when it's connected with advertising, I feel that is not yet very clearly laid down. So while we, of course, hold all parties responsible, though primarily, the advertiser kind of, as the owner of the ad responsible. But, when it comes to, let's say, non-compliance, we do raise these issues with the broadcaster or the platform, which has carried those ads. But yeah, I think, and it's actually, let me also tell you, it's not just a challenge in India. I mean, this is a challenge globally that, all of us in the self-regulatory world, when we kind of talk about, this is really one of the big challenges that, you have these large internet, platforms, and they have their own internal community guidelines, but really they have very little way or an infrastructure or the expertise to know what is misleading, right? So the community guidelines will hopefully protect the consumers online from, abusive content or very explicit content. But, if you have, a car ad which says that, I give you X mileage, per liter, really there is no way that these internet platforms will know whether that's the truth or not. So unless there is a body such as ASCII, and of course there will be other kind of bodies as well who can kind of vet, what is being said. And I think once we have done that process and then communicated this to the platforms, how easy or difficult is it for them to kind of also take it off, I think becomes the question. But I think this is an evolving conversation, Pradyuman, not just in India, but, I've been part of some global conversations also on this issue. So I think there is some way for us to go, but it is an issue that is definitely being looked at.
And how have these platforms responded? These channels, clearly we know who the channels are. We have Star at one end and we have Geo at another, who are doing this. And apart from that, a host of digital players which are carrying scores and the like. So, because at the end of the day, they are looking for revenues. They have invested a fair amount of money on rights, etc., and they need to look at revenues. So, how have they been responsive to your missives on what should be done?
I think overall, I mean, of course, this IPL, we are still in the process of, looking at some of the cases, but I would say it has been pretty good. I think overall, we do have, particularly television channels, etc., being quite responsive. You would know, Pradyuman, that the ASCII code is also part of the Cable TV Network Act. So it is in a sense not legal for a broadcaster to broadcast an ad that may be against an ASCII guideline. So the advertising code which is enshrined in the Cable TV Act mentions that the ASCII code needs to be adhered to. Also, a lot of the OTT platforms are actually players who also have TV channels, right, in India. And therefore, there is, I think, the kind of the discipline, and I think the internal regulatory systems to kind of be careful. However, I mean, I would not say that it is 100% foolproof, but I would say to a large extent, it does work.
But I'm sorry to say, but it doesn't seem to be working so well. Right? Because you do see these ads on you've seen these ads on across the IPL format. I agree that they are not selling pan masala, but they're selling elaichi. And you have an Amitabh Bachchan out there who is, the holiest of the cows that exist, and in a sense untouchable by the various powers that be. So is that really a gone case? Because at the end of the day, television channels will want ads. They want the revenue, and you have people who do that. So I know this is not going to be an interview on surrogate advertising totally, but I know it's taking a fair amount of time. But the question is that it's perhaps easier to get India and Pakistan to talk to each other than perhaps stop surrogate advertising.
Yeah, so I think one of the common, misconceptions, or I would just say lack of awareness, is actually what is surrogate advertising. And there is a definition of it in the law which separates it from brand extensions. And I think as consumers, and I mean, I would not say that, this is a confusion only in the minds of a few. I would say this is a widespread confusion or lack of knowledge that the law allows brand extensions. Okay, so if you have, let's say you're an alcohol brand and then you launch something else, now, so long as that's a viable business in the sense that it has a certain distribution presence and turnover, the law does not consider that to be a surrogate ad, right? A surrogate ad is almost like when you have created a fake category. Now, in many of these cases, and these are cases that we have examined in the past, Pradyuman, that in some cases, the turnover that is asked for by ASCII and CBFC. So we have criteria that we have aligned in terms of how to separate surrogate advertising from brand extensions. In many cases, they are able to meet those criteria. Having said that, I think the ASCII code itself is not is not a static code, right? It is an evolving code. It is a living document. And I think if there are consumer concerns around these issues that continue and we see a certain behavior from the industry, I think it will kind of come up in discussions. And the question would be that, do we need to raise the bar? Do we need to tighten the norms? Do we need to introduce new norms? So I think those are, again, matters that, are part of ongoing discussions. But yeah, I think the key challenge is that a lot of people respond to this calling it surrogate advertising, whereas technically, a lot of them are actually brand extensions, which are permissible in law. And therefore, the advertising of those is permissible in law. And ASCII is not a statutory body to say what the law permits, ASCII will stop. We don't have that kind of mandate. So I do appreciate that, these issues do worry consumers and other stakeholders. In some cases, there is perhaps a lack of a singular clarity about the law as well. Alcohol, for example, is a state subject. There's no central law around that. So there are some of these challenges around surrogate advertising and brand extensions, which are not fully understood by everyone. And it is a complex issue. So I don't kind of blame anyone for, not understanding that fully. But I think those are the the guardrails, through which we have to operate, as a self-regulator. As I said, brand extension is allowed by law, and we have defined what we say when we say brand extension versus surrogate. So that's the norm that we apply. But like I said, I think, it's a living document. We kind of updated some of these guidelines, just a few months, I would say just about a year ago. So it's not as if, again, these are cast in stone and can't be relooked at, depending on, I think, what different stakeholders feel about it and what are the practical ways in which we can address this issue.
The government has been fairly active. The Ministry of Consumer Affairs has been fairly active, has always been active about advertising. I remember they have been very active even in the past, even in the previous regime. But over the last few years, and last year specifically, you have a very active secretary who's aware of the way things are going. So one last question on Surrogate: Are they aware of how things are, and are they doing something about it? Whatever you can say on record, please do tell us.
Yeah, so the CCPA guidelines that were issued on the 9th of June last year, have a clear clause that says that surrogate advertising is not permitted. But then equally in the same clause, it adds, however, mere use of the brand name, is okay. That does not constitute surrogate advertising. But yeah, I don't think that there is anyone in the country that is unaware of, some of the public angst on this issue. And, so like I said, I think there are discussions at different forums, both informal and formal, that keep happening. And this is certainly an issue that comes up. And I can tell you that, whether it's the Department of Consumer Affairs or whether it is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, this is an agenda that is that is being discussed.
Do you think, I know I said one last question, but I'm going to extend it once more, like just as brand extensions. Do you think IPL 2024, we will see lesser number of what are called brand extensions or surrogates? Will there be more awareness? Will broadcasters, will platforms feel a little more guilty of promoting tobacco and alcohol consumption when they shouldn't be doing it?
So I think there are two things, Pradyuman. One is, what's each person's or each organization's moral compass versus what is permitted in law, right? What is permitted in law, at a reasonable level, you cannot stop a business from doing. So I think it is perhaps clarity on the other side, to my mind, which can lead to a resolution of this issue. I think if we expect broadcasters to, reject revenue, which is in that sense, technically legal and allowed under the law, I think that may be a bit too much to expect. So I feel, that's my personal view, that I think it is clarity in regulations that is going to drive the change rather than any, internal norms or decisions.
Clarity in regulations in an election year may be a little tough to expect, but be that as it may, I think, do you sometimes feel that ASCII is misunderstood in terms of its role and what it should be doing? Because every IPL, especially over the last few years, you have a few people who talk about, how surrogate advertising is being allowed by ASCII, etc. Do you sometimes feel that that's the thing, and perhaps the ecosystem needs to understand you all better?
Yeah, well, I do think that, we may not be fully understood in terms of our role and mandate, but honestly, I would put that responsibility at ASCII's own doorstep and not really, at the feet of people who are outside of ASCII and kind of, seeing what we do. I think, and again, it is something which is not just true of ASCII. Again, we've, in conversations with similar bodies across the world, this is, I think, anything to do with advertising, ASCII is kind of seen as the first resort. And, we also get tagged on a lot of things that we don't necessarily handle around advertising. But I think, as I said, I think that responsibility is ours. And if we have not clarified either at a collective level or at an individual level what we can or can't do, then, that's a conversation that we need to have. But in some way, I feel that I mean, in some way, you cannot expect everyone to understand all the nuances of our work. I mean, it is a complex, system. It is, there are several nuances. And I think to some extent, part of me actually feels happy that, when it comes to anything with advertising, ASCII is tagged. It may be a little bit of a, sometimes a difficult thing for us to handle, but I feel that, that shows that people do have that expectation of us, and maybe we, can meet some of their expectations, if not all.
That's the branding specialist in you talking, right? Any publicity is
Not,
good.
no, not really. I mean, I would genuinely look at all of this and say, okay, is this something that we need to be doing? It may not be in our current mandate, but again, those are questions that we must ask ourselves as an organization as we go forward. That, I mean, is there, is it time to think about what our mandate should be? And, if not us, then who else is going to handle these issues for consumers? So I think there's no easy answer. And, we will kind of have several conversations and discussions on what we can realistically do. What is the mandate that the industry has given us? Because remember that, in a sense, we are appointed by the industry to take care of their advertising with a certain kind of mandate. So how do we kind of also have those conversations with the people who have given us the mandate, along with stakeholders who have expectations of what we need to be doing. So I think that's again an ongoing kind of issue, and we'll keep working at it.
Great. Let's move on. We've spoken a fair bit on surrogate advertising, but that, I guess, was the elephant in the room, and we've just done with IPL, and clearly those are the issues that are being discussed. But you mentioned about the complexity of the operation that ASCII has. And a few weeks back, you had the roster of the complaints that you've been receiving, and you kind of ranked also where the complaints have been coming from, maximum number of complaints have been coming from. And then you, of course, also had the education guidelines that you issued. And the education guidelines have taken off from what they were earlier. So clearly, ASCII has been embracing a lot of the current issues, and you have evolved. But are there certain things that you think should perhaps be, once again, with education, it's a responsibility of the platforms, of the newspapers who accept those ads. So do you sometimes feel that they are the parts of the ecosystem that are letting you down in terms of ensuring that the guidelines are followed?
Well, to some extent, yes, I guess, because if and one of the things that Pradyuman, we are driving at ASCII, and maybe I'll talk about that a little later, is if self-regulation can be done at the point of creation of the advertising, or at the point of publication rather than post, so the corrective action will always be there, and there is a reason why it exists. But I mean, truly, I think, if there is enlightened kind of media, enlightened advertisers who really believe that, the consumers and audiences and viewers that they have deserve to be told the truth, and, in a way that is not seen as detrimental to their own business. I think if that's the spirit that people can embrace, it will certainly, solve a lot of problems for us. But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, I mean, it is business, it is economics, it is, something that people may not necessarily pay attention to. So yes, I mean, those are areas. But again, I would say that, it's again something that we need to do to also push that ecosystem, educate that ecosystem. So there are, I think, all sorts of problems. I think my focus is on what can we do about it as an organization, and where can we move with that.
But, it is like saying that you need to educate a person to not steal, right? Or not do something wrong. Wherein the person should be knowing herself or himself that what they're doing is wrong, right? Or what they're doing is encouraging is wrong. So clearly, while you're being very nice to them, and that they should be they need to be educated, and perhaps you all need to do it. But the fact of the matter is that those cogs in the ecosystem are perhaps the weakest link, and perhaps also the government in terms of its policies which are not perhaps very watertight.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, Pradyuman, I mean, the fact is that there are all of these issues in the ecosystem, right? So, I mean, I'm not kind of, for a moment saying that they don't exist. They do exist. I think the challenge is what do you do about it? So in an ideal world, yes, I think, I mean, forget, at the time of publication, but I mean, every brand manager making an ad or approving an ad would not let an ad pass. If it did not, kind of, let's say, either meet all of ASCII's guidelines or any of the laws that they are governed with. So that is an ideal situation. Worldwide, we know that doesn't happen. There are leaks at every point of view, whether it's pressure of competition, whether it's pressure of revenues. Sometimes it's just lack of, I think sensitivity, lack of, or just that saying ki advertising hai, so you can take a little bit of license, and when does that kind of cross the line and become misleading? So all of these problems do exist, and in an ideal world, honestly, I mean, I keep saying that our job will truly be done when we are redundant. I don't see that happening very soon, so we will keep at it. But yeah, I mean, the ideal world is where everyone who is creating a piece of advertisement knows what can or can't be done, or should not be done.
ASCII had a few months back, or perhaps a year back, introduced this proposition to the industry where they could send their creatives for checking. How has that done?
So I think it's been a little bit of a slow start. I think, again, that culture of having an external check, I think there is some resistance to it. We do have some companies who have been regularly sending us, their creatives, so I think maybe we've done around 25 to 30 creatives that have come to us before it kind of goes out into the public domain. And I think they've also found the advice very useful. So, small things that they could change in the ads, could kind of make sure that they are within the bounds of the ASCII violations. And I mean, Pradyuman, being in the CCC, you know yourself that a lot of times it is some really small things that need to be changed in the ad. It's not necessarily the whole ad has to be kind of overhauled. But I think it's a cultural change, and also how do we reward, that piece of due diligence that is done. So just to give you an example, in the Consumer Protection Act, it says that if an endorser has done their due diligence, they are not liable, even if the ad is eventually found misleading. And that gives an incentive to the endorser to do their due diligence, right? So similarly, is there, can we encourage advertisers to do this voluntarily? In some countries, certain categories, are kind of mandated as pre-clearance. Right. So, in some countries, advertising to children, advertising on liquor, gambling, etc., actually all have to go through pre-clearances with self-regulatory organizations. In Europe in particular, there is a huge culture of sending the ad to the self-regulatory organization before it goes. Just to give you an example, I think Spain does 42,000 pieces of ad advice a year. I think the UK does over 30,000. So it's as if that is a step without which the ad will not go forward, right? We are still far away from that system. We are just starting out in terms of, really making this a very robust service. So I think people will, hopefully see the value and work, and include this as part of their campaign development. I think the two things that people are worried about at that point of time is speed and confidentiality. And I think on both those counts, ASCII service does very, very well. And I think the other is, can there be some incentive? Perhaps, can there be lesser penalties, let's say by the law, if someone has done their due diligence in good faith? So at least to kind of recognize their intent. And while that does not, in a sense, stop the law from, taking up an ad that it believes to be misleading, but can there be incentives built in for people who have demonstrated the intent to do the right thing? So I think those are, again, parts of the ecosystem that, if they come together, can work very powerfully. But till then, we will keep, again, I think building awareness for it, which is also not very high. And, I think the people who have done it, I think, have kind of come back to us again and again. So I think for those who see the benefits of the service, it's a great value add.
So are the advertising agencies doing it, or are clients doing it directly?
It's a mix. It's a mix.
And has any certain category of advertising done it more than others in terms of product category, etc.?
Yeah, so Pradyuman, I would say right now the numbers are not really so high for us to kind of make a very specific analysis, but I think it's been across. We've had food companies, we've had companies who are fantasy sports, we've had healthcare companies. So it's been a bit of a mix. I mean, I would not say that there is only one particular kind of category that's coming to us.
The other thing that ASCII has done with has done a fair bit of work on is influencer advertising, and that's been given the way advertising has grown, and that new aspect of advertising has started happening over the last few years, especially on digital. What has been your experience with that?
So it's been interesting, to say the least. I think it's actually a very exciting part of advertising today. When you meet all of these influencers, we did a summit recently. I mean, really, you're energized by their just the energy levels, etc. And I think the other important thing to remember is that a lot of these influencers are really new and very fresh and raw, right? I mean, every day you have thousands of youngsters who join this what has become a profession. And remember that they don't necessarily come with training in either marketing, advertising, or have been part of a large organization which will kind of, in a very structured way, educate you about what to do or what not to do. I mean, these are essentially people who are, you have a creative spark and want to do something interesting and are looking to make a profession out of it. So I would say that this is really very nascent right now. But I think it's important for it to have the right foundation, because as more and more advertising money goes towards this, how do you kind of create that sense of responsibility? How do you create the guardrails within which they must operate to actually be sustainable themselves as an industry is very important. Again, very, very complex to regulate, very, very complex to monitor, because, it's very difficult sometimes to make out the difference between pure content and paid content. They pretty much look very similar. And so I think one is that we recognize that it is going to become a bigger part of the ecosystem. And, therefore, we are in constant engagement with the influencer agencies and, through whom we get to know what is happening at that end as well. And also from an ASCII perspective, I think our investments in some AI-based software to track, potential violations. So I think it's again a very challenging and interesting space, and we are kind of gearing up to kind of both handhold and, also kind of lay down very clearly what is okay and what's not.
One of the peeves that I have had with, and I know that ASCII is not able to address it, is but the kind of advertising that happens in the form of paid content. And unfortunately, it's not really under the purview of ASCII, because there's also the Press Council, even though publications and other platforms do accept monies for it. So it is in the form of advertising that exists. But I know it's not really in the ambit of an ASCII. Though I wish really people would take cognizance of what should be good behavior in the media, right? But that's really tough to expect, isn't it?
And, you're absolutely right. I think, again, what is content versus what is ad, what is paid content? I think finally, there is a sense that, this is branded content and this is paid content, and, it must therefore, be subject to certain kind of norms and, the whole idea of what is permissible and what's not. But I think, again, the evolution in this is quite rapid. As I said, the whole lines between content and advertising are so blurred and also changing every day. Formats are changing every day. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think as self-regulators, and I'm sure even regulators, we have to kind of constantly invest in understanding that space better, invest in understanding the technology better, make sure that at the highest levels of the government, the regulations keep pace with what is happening. And, there is technology to kind of uncover some of the things that are not in the radar, because it is difficult for everything to be very clearly established, in the entire digital and influencer space.
Since we don't speak to you too often over interviews like these, one of the things that's going to happen over the next 1 year is political advertising. And I know that political advertising doesn't come under the ambit again of an ASCII, but do you think it should?
So I think, again, as you said, it is the mandate that is given to us, right? So since we are self-regulators, the self has to give us the mandate, right? There are countries, again, in which political or government advertising is under the mandate, but that's, again, a mandate given to the self-regulator by the government. So I guess, it's a little difficult to answer this because, so while, of course, advertising has really gained as a sector, when it comes to political or to, the ads that are government-led, etc. But the fact is that, the nature of advertising could be very different. And therefore, I think, I mean, I'm not sure. I think at this point of time, I don't think we necessarily have the entire competence also to handle that. But yeah, I mean, if that's a mandate that is given, then one has to develop the competence and the infrastructure to be able to do that.
Sorry, this will be the mandate from home.
The mandate has to come from the people who are advertising, right? I mean, so the mandate has to come from the government saying that, yes, Mr. Self-regulation or Ms. Self-regulation, would you, please look at our ads as well. See, when it comes to and that's what self-regulation is, right? That the people whose ads it is have voluntarily put a set of rules around themselves, right? So, and that is what separates it from regulation. Regulation is that, it applies to everyone. Whereas self-regulation, the emergence of the rules or the rules that are decided by the people upon whom it will be applied. So, I mean, and that is fundamental to self-regulation.
And frankly, I think that's something that's not going to happen over the next say 20, 30, 50 years in India at least, because I don't think political parties will do that. But anyway, let's not get into that discussion. I think we've had an excellent discussion. We've discussed surrogates. We've discussed the challenges that an ASCII or a self-regulatory body has like this, and what should be perhaps understood by the ecosystem, and clearly the need for every member of the ecosystem to appreciate the need for some amount of self-regulation and some amount of checks and balances. I know you haven't said that, but I'm just interpreting it. But thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this session. I think we just wanted to speak with you also to clear the air. There's been a fair bit that has been written, spoken about the role of ASCII, especially in the case of IPL advertising, and perhaps it's cleared the air, or perhaps it hasn't. We'll leave others to decide. Thank you very much, Manisha, for this, for spending quality time on a bright May afternoon.
No, thank you. It's always good to have these conversations, and I mean, if it's help clear the air, I would be the happiest and happy to do this any number of times. But yeah, I don't think that would we would be that lucky that it would happen just with one interaction. But yeah, I think we'll keep at it. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about the work that we do and to kind of present that to your viewers. So thank you, Pradyuman.
Thank you very much. Thank you.